Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being with us tonight. So I hope I'm not giving you an echo. We are videotaping this to post on our website. So thank you for your interest in being here tonight. I'm with John Galbraith, our CFO, COO for the district, and our Lion Learning session tonight is going to be about the physical plant and equipment levy. And I failed to introduce myself. I'm Amy Kortmeyer, the proud superintendent here at Linn-Mar Community School District. And just over a week ago, our school board put forth a resolution to go out for the physical plant and equipment levy vote that will be taking place on March 5th. And so tonight we'd like to talk to you a little bit more about PPEL and what PPEL funding does for us as a district currently. So the next slide just shares for our audience. Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you for being here. Our next slide just shows us, and you probably are all aware, but the fact that we have 12 attendance centers in our district and 7 elementary schools, 2 intermediate schools, 2 middle schools, and 2 high schools. John's going to get into more of the financial picture, and then you'll hear from me again when we talk a little bit about school district enrollment. So again, thank you for being here tonight and for your interest.
Thank you, Amy. So I'm just going to give a brief overview of all of the different funds, the revenue sources, and the expenses that can come out of those funds. So first we have the general fund. That's funded by property taxes, state aid, miscellaneous income. The expenses for that are salaries, benefits, materials, utilities, and some other expenses. 80% of our general fund expenditures are salaries and benefits, so 80% of that pays our staff. Fund that is funded by property tax. The expenses for that is our liability, property insurance, and any early retirements. The PERL fund is the physical education recreation levy. That's also a property tax. That's a 13.5 cent per thousand valuation property tax, and that pays for playgrounds and rec community spaces. The PPEL fund, which is why we're here tonight, is funded by property taxes, and the expenses for that is building construction, maintenance, vehicles, equipment, technology, and lease agreements. The debt service fund, which is funded by property tax, that's where our general obligation bonds would come from, and that the revenue so is the property tax and or transfers. And the reason that's transfers is that if we borrow money against our SAVE fund, we have to pay it out of our debt service. So we have to transfer revenue in from SAVE to debt service to pay those. So the expenses for that is our debt principal and interest payments. Next, there is our the SAVE fund, which is this funded by sales tax, the 1 cent statewide sales tax that's allocated to us from the state on a per pupil basis. And the expenses for that are capital projects, technology, very, very similar to what we can use PPEL dollars for. And then we have the student activity fund. Revenues from that come from admissions, fundraising, student dues, gate receipts, and the expenses that is supported out of that is anything for our co-curricular activities. Our nutrition fund, revenues are meal sales and then federal and state reimbursements. The expenses is anything food service related. So it pays for our food, it pays for the personnel, it pays for some equipment to produce our food in our kitchens. Then we have 2 enterprise funds, so our school store, the Roar store, and then our aquatic center, the pool. And the expenses there are anything that supports that. So for example, at the Roar store, it buys the shirts and so on and so forth there. And then at the pool, it's the upkeep, maintenance, utilities. It's everything that supports our pool. So this is a taken look back at fiscal year 23. So that's the fiscal year that ended on June 30th of 23. So our past full fiscal year. We're currently in 24, but this gives us a picture of an entire year. So in FY23, we had a total revenues of just under $167 million. 40% of that was state aid, 25% was property tax. Then as we look at the expenditures, we had $133 million, just over $133 million in expenditures. About 65% of that was salaries and benefits. And remember, this is all funds, so not just the general fund, but all funds. About 14.5% is purchase services, and about 9% in supplies and equipment. So a little more specifically, state aid payments, make up about 56% or 56 million of just under the $100 million in revenue, and then 30% of that is property taxes. Then expenditures, like I said before, just under 80% of that is our salaries and benefits to support our people, our staff. So PPEL, what is PPEL? PPEL is the physical plant and equipment levy. It's really our main revenue source to maintain our infrastructure investments. And it is funded by property tax. So it can come in two forms, and we have both of these. The first form is a board-approved levy. So the board has the authority to approve a 33-cent levy per $1,000 valuation. And then the second levy is the voter-approved levy, which is what will be on the ballot on March 5th. And that can be a levy that does not exceed $1.34 per 1,000 valuation. Linn-Mar currently has a $1.34 levy in place for PPEL that expires on June 30th of 2025. The legal uses for PPEL, so I'll read through these fairly quick. This really comes right from the state code on all the legal uses that we can use PPEL funds for. So the purchase and improvement of grounds, constructing schoolhouses or buildings, opening roads to schoolhouses or buildings, the purchase of a single piece of equipment exceeding $500 in value, paying debts contracted for the erection or construction of schoolhouses or buildings. We are currently doing that. We took a PPEL note out for a high school project roughly 10 years ago. Repairing, remodeling, reconstructing, improving or expanding schoolhouses or buildings in additions to existing schoolhouses, expenditures for energy conservation, the renting of facilities, purchasing transportation equipment for transporting students, and the lease purchase option agreements for school buildings or equipment. So that was kind of the legal terminology there of what they're used for. So this is kind of how we've used it for here at Linn-Mar in the past 10 years. So the improvement of grounds, so our snow removal equipment, our lawn mowers, our weed eaters, skid loaders, those sorts of things that we have for grounds upkeep were purchased from PPEL. Roof repair and replacement, we do, it varies a little bit year by year, but roughly $600,000 a year in roof replacements across the district to keep our roofs in good repair and in good shape. Pays for parking lot repairs and replacements, HVAC repairs and upgrades, and it also pays for lease agreements. It pays for bus purchases. We purchase, again, it can vary a little bit year to year, but roughly 4 buses per year. We did 4 last year in FY23, and we're purchasing 4 in FY24. Some technology and equipment, electrical upgrades and repairs, window replacements. The windows in this building were updated out of PPEL. Door replacements, plumbing repairs and upgrades, and energy conservation projects. Minor remodeling, so really more than just a repair, but kind of an upgrade per se. So I believe the pictures here are actually over at Bowman Woods, where there was some minor remodeling, some new carpet, new ceilings, paint, those sorts of things to keep our buildings looking nice. Food service equipment that I had mentioned before, and then the O&M equipment. Turn it back over to Amy.
Yeah, thank you, John. So the next couple of slides really paint the story about, why PPEL funding is, desperately needed. Not only the 33-cent board approved, but also the $1.34 voter approved. And what you can see here is just a picture of historically we've been with certified enrollment and that gradual increase up until our high point of the 2022 school year with 7,685 students. We did see a decline in that certified enrollment number this past school year at 7,566, and I'll just take a minute to address that. That has us down 118 students, and of course that's a hit. And when you look at these numbers and think about all those funds that we were talking about before, this is really a hit this year to our general fund moving forward. Our general fund is made up essentially of our total number of students times a district cost per pupil. So being down 118 students is going to impact that general fund to the tune of about $1 million last year. But we're focused on PPEL tonight. But the reason we're sharing this with you is it does help paint the story about why we've done some of the facilities projects that we've done over the last several years as we've had this growing population. During my earlier tenure in the district, we were growing, at records like around 400 students a year. So you saw additional attendance centers being built at that time. And of course, we've had other facilities built besides our attendance centers as well. Just for your awareness, that 118 students that we lost this year, we also have a number that the state has shared with us that 231 of our residents received the educational savings accounts this year, sometimes known as the school vouchers. And from those students, we know that 54 of those students were with us last year. So we can think about the 118 students. We know that 54 of those were with us last year. We also are seeing our open enrollment numbers increase and are more than our open enrollment end, so it's not a net zero. The differential right now is around 250 students, maybe a little bit more, and so that's something that we're cognizant of and are going to be reaching out to our families, both that are open enrolling in and out, because we do have a healthy amount that are open enrolling into our district. We'd like to, of course, see that be a net zero or even have more of our students open enrolling in than out. So we got some work to do to understand why that trend has happened in the last couple of years. That differential didn't happen this past year. This past year, we have a net loss out roughly of around 25 students. But I only bring up enrollment to you to say it is a piece of the picture when we have, roughly 7,500 students in the district that has the need for gives us the need for 12 attendance centers, and then just the dollars behind it that are needed to keep our buildings and our facilities all updated. So the next slides are going to talk about that square footage and where we've gone. But since 2015, our facilities square footage has increased to 1.2 million roughly. And I'll let John talk a little bit about that. Of course, you can imagine what's happened between that 2020 school year and 2021 with the advent of the two intermediate buildings. John?
No problem. So yeah, like Amy said, that's the addition of the Hazel Point and Boulder Peak is why our square footage went up. But our PPEL funding doesn't increase based on square footage, so we have to stretch those dollars further and further when we are increasing our square footage to keep all of our buildings maintained at the level that we have all come to expect. So how much will this generate? So the $1.34 portion, so only the voter portion of the PPEL levy, this fiscal year in FY24 generates roughly $3.5 million. In year 10 of that extension will be roughly up to $4.7 million, and that's based on the district's taxable valuation increasing by 3.5% per year, and that was the average that it increased the last 10 years. So just trying to project some numbers going forward on what that will look like. This is the ballot language. I can give you guys just a little bit here to read this if you so choose. I've said most of everything that's in there already, so I don't want to be super redundant, but this is what will be on the ballot on March 5th, and this is the ballot language that was approved in the resolution by the board last Monday. Polling locations. So polling locations, being that it's a federal election year, from what we've heard from the county auditor, aren't 100% set yet, and they tend to be different in a federal election year because of the turnout. So they don't want to add confusion to the voting population they vote somewhere different at a special election than they do a federal election. So since those aren't set in stone, if you scan that takes you to the Secretary of State website, and then you're able to put in your address and it'll give you your exact polling location. So as much as we wanted to put all of our polling locations on there, we weren't comfortable with the information we were getting from the county auditor that it was accurate yet. So obviously the Secretary of State page is always updated, so you're able to find that there. And we have a little bit of a video here to listen to.
Greetings, everyone. I am Amy Courtmeyer, and I'm so very proud to be the superintendent of the Linn-Mar Community School District. Together, we celebrate the dedicated work of our amazing students, teachers, and staff. Along with the people, we sometimes take for granted the facilities and services we offer our students that require our attention and our resources. You may have noticed these signs across our campuses. PPEL, the Physical Plant and Equipment Levy, is a way we finance certain projects, like this parking lot expansion here at Linn-Mar High School.
The Physical Plant and Equipment Levy is used to pay to improve school buildings and grounds, purchase technology, safety equipment, and other specific needs. Thanks to your continued support, PPEL has been in place for a long time here at Linn-Mar. The current PPEL will expire in June of 2025, so now is the time to renew it for another 10 years. A renewal of the levy will be on the ballot in a special election on March 5th.
Before you go to the polls, we want to show you some of the many ways we have used PPEL funds over the past few years to benefit the students, teachers, and staff here at Linn-Mar.
Here at the Transportation Department, PPEL funds have allowed us to maintain our transportation fleet and help purchase 3 to 4 school buses each year.
Keeping our athletic facilities up to date and in playing condition also takes money. PPEL funds were recently used to sand and refinish our main gym floor here at the high school.
Iowa's weather can be rough on any building, and we have 15 to maintain. This 20-year-old roof at Oak Ridge was replaced this past summer using PPEL money. PPEL helps us update our building's fire alarm systems, make HVAC repairs, and tuck point our exterior walls.
Here at Boulder Peak and in all our schools, PPEL funds help pay for vacuum cleaners, floor scrubbers, and other equipment that help keep our buildings in tip-top shape.
Thanks to your continued support of PPEL, our students and teachers have benefited from updated furnishings in our classrooms and commons areas here at the high school and throughout the district.
PPEL funding has played a part in recent changes here at Wilkins and some of our other elementary buildings. These include updated lockers, restrooms, flooring, and some other improvements.
Thanks to PPEL, we have the equipment to help maintain the turf here at the stadium. Across all our school grounds, over 200 plus acres, lawnmowers, snowplows, and snowblowers keep things looking good in the summer and help us avoid slippery sidewalks and driveways in the winter.
Hi, I'm here at Novak Elementary. PPEL funds partially support the technology here and throughout the district. It can pay for things like technology hardware, hosting services, equipment leases, copiers, and updated security systems.
We hope this tour helps you understand how we use the Physical Plant and Equipment Levy all across our district. As you can see, it is essential. We pride ourselves on being fiscally conservative and using our funds wisely. We know it takes time to vote, but we hope that you head to the polls on March 5th. Thank you for your time today. Thank you. That's the end of our presentation, and appreciate John sharing the information that he shared. But we have plenty of time now to take any questions and help answer anything that you may be thinking about. Kevin.
Thank you. John, you had said, what was 167 million, that was the revenue? 167 million was the revenue for last year?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
For all funds, yeah.
Yep, just under 167 for all funds, correct.
Expenditures were 133 million?
Correct.
What happens to the other 34 million?
Yeah, so part of that is we issued some save bonds last year for the admin building. So there's some extra revenue because we haven't had all those expenditures come out because that's under construction. So that's part of that. The other part of that is we potentially don't spend quite all of our save dollars that come in every year. We don't spend all of our PPEL dollars that come in every year. So those still carry forward to be expended in other years. Pearl's another good case of that because of the funding that comes in for that is relatively small per year. So like the tennis courts is an example where we will save Pearl money year by year until there's enough there to accomplish a larger project. So that's what some of that is there's just carry forward balances there that can, maybe we're saving for a larger purchase that we can't just do in 1 year's revenues.
Go ahead, Kevin.
You have votings for 1.34%, right? And you said the board can assign 0.33.
Mm-hmm.
Does that include, so we get 1.34 plus the 0.33?
Correct.
We didn't talk about that revenue. How much is the 0.33?
Is it?
Yep, the 0.33 this year is roughly $800,000.
So between the two of them, we're talking about $4.5 to $5 million.
Yep, this year 4.3 million this year, and then obviously when the property valuations change, then that fluctuates every year based on the district's taxable value.
Over the next 10-year period, we're in excess of $60 million.
That's probably pretty close.
And that's not counting any new construction that comes into the area.
Potentially, because what we did to figure out what we were from 10 years from now, that included 3.5% growth. So within that growth, that could either be just the raise in property valuations as it is now, or any new construction that comes into. So obviously in the past 10 years, we've had some new construction, and that 3.5% growth is what the average was over the last 10 years.
Okay, but in the last couple of years, we've seen a growth spurt in property building, right? And over the course of the last couple of years, we're seeing probably anywhere between 50 to 100 homes built a year. Probably correct.
Good question. I don't know those numbers off the top of my head.
Based upon what the administration is saying as far as the town council,
Yep.
we're talking about 600 people a year moving into Linn-Mar.
Yep.
Into the Marion district. Not all of them go to Linn-Mar, but at 600 people, if the average household is 4, you're probably 150 houses a year. But that's part of the 3.5%.
Yeah, so that 3.5% was the average growth per year over the last 10 years. So some years it's less, some years it's more. But so all of that new construction over the past 10 years factors into that 3.5% growth.
So what you're asking for is $60 million over the next 10 years. What's the maintenance cost that we're looking at, just to maintain our buildings and things like that?
Yeah, so right now of the $4.3 million, roughly 1.2 of that pays for our note, our PPEL note borrowing that we did for a project up at the high school. About $1 million of that goes towards technology. $600,000 goes towards roofs. Buses, another $550,000 to $600,000 for buses. So our maintenance in there, I believe, takes us down to about $170,000 is what we have left over, if my math's any good there.
So to maintenance all the buildings, we're talking about 100. I don't think that's going to cover our maintenance, does it?
It's pretty close. Yep. And Kevin, what I can do too is I can go through and I can put that all down in a chart of here's what we've budgeted for that $4.3 million for this year to break that out as well.
And the reason I'm asking these questions is because what you're asking for is when you put this out, you say $3.5 to $5 million a year, and over the course of 10 years, we're looking at $60 million. What dollar amount do we need, and what is the dollar amount we want? Because what you're asking for is to give you just a carte blanche on saying, hey, just give us the maximum, because that's what you're asking for, the maximum dollar amount, and then we'll spend it accordingly.
Yep.
I don't know if that's a fair statement because you can see all the variety in the ballot language, the variety of ways that we can spend it. And I think we've done, a nice job of sharing what we've spent it on in the recent past and, what would necessarily be on a recurring nature in the future, right? So parking lots, we know we need buses, roofs are always going to be on repair. So we've got life cycle needs that are always going to be there. And like John said, we can definitely spell that out over long term if you think that's going to be helpful for our general population to understand how year in and year out we're using that $4 to $5 million.
Transparency part of it is very important.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Kevin.
You're asking voters for $5 to $6 million a year, so where is that money going?
Yep, that's fair. I think that's a great addition to the slideshow. Laura?
Yeah, can you go back to the slide that's like from this income we can spend it on this, and for this income we can spend it on this specific.
Oh, the funds.
So each of those rows seems very delineated out. And I just want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. So like you can only use property taxes from
Right. That's a great question, and I'll let John answer it, but by and large, you cannot mix those funding streams, and that's why we've tried to spell that out. I've seen a lot of different displays over time. Lots of times people use a graphics of buckets and how, what the revenue is versus the expenditures that are allowed, but very good question, because you might just ask, well, you've got, $100 million in your general fund. Why don't you just start picking up the cost there? I'll let John speak to that.
Yeah, so Amy's exactly right. Is there are restrictions on all funds on what that can be used for. So for your example, like on the Pearl Fund or the PPEL Fund, the money that comes in for that can only be spent on those eligible expenses. So we can't, for example, the question that we get a lot is, well, if you want $6 million more a year, why can't we pay teachers more? Well, we can't pay teachers more with our PPEL levy. Like, that is not an authorized expense out of that fund. So it is very stringent. This is kind of the simplified version of the state code that reads all of it. Obviously, we've talked about the PPEL fund, and that ballot language has all of that legal jargon that's in there. The rest of the funds have something very similar to that, but this is just kind of the broke down basic, here's what's eligible. But the intermixing of funds, you are not allowed to do that. Let me clarify that though a little bit. So PPEL and SAVE, although we can't spend the revenues from SAVE on PPEL expenditures, the eligible expenditures are very, very similar there. So I could potentially pay for a new parking lot out of SAVE or out of PPEL. Not to add to your confusion, but those are two funds that are very, very similar in nature as far as what expenses are eligible, but it's still two different revenue streams. Correct.
Okay, thank you. But kind of tag off his point of transparency, I guess, can you explain that, is it PPEL that's only used for janitorial and grounds maintenance, or is there other sources of funding for what you call upkeep or maintenance, HVAC, windows, the grounds,
Yep. So PPEL would be eligible there. And then SAVE would be eligible there as long as it's not routine maintenance. So if there's routine maintenance, so the example I like to use is your furnace filter at home. You have to change that every month, every 3 months, whatever it is there. So we have a lot of HVAC equipment here. That's just a routine thing you have to do. That is not a PPEL eligible expense. It has to be a repair or an improvement. It cannot be routine maintenance. Routine maintenance still falls underneath of our general fund. Yep. So the employees, so our electricians, our grounds workers, plumbers, all of our O&M employees, their salaries aren't funded out of PPEL or SAVE. Their salaries are still funded out of the general fund as well.
John, I just want to make sure. So you're saying that the PPEL money is not used for current maintenance?
It has to be a repair. This is where it gets really, really gray and blurry. But it has to be for a repair or an improvement. It can't be used for a routine maintenance. So that's the definition they give you. So there is a wide gray area there of what's routine and what's a repair, right? So that's why I like to use the furnace filter example, because I think most people can relate to that I can't pay for that expense out of PPEL. That comes out of the general fund. Now, a roof, that would be PPEL. Yep. Because I'm making a repair. Yep. Yes, you could.
Is there something that you can use? Is there something that you can use the PPEL fund for that you can't use the SAVE dollars for? I guess what would be the purpose of renewing the PPEL if we can already use the SAVE dollars for all that criteria?
You want to take that one?
Yeah, and I might lean on some of our board members as well. What I would say is, because we've been a growing district, right, and we've had several stakeholder groups come together to determine what future facilities projects needs to be, we need all that we can get from the PPEL to help with the upkeep, as well as the SAVE dollars then to do things like a build of another attendance center, the stadium project, all the things that that recent stakeholder group put together, we're doing some combination of things, right? Performance venue, save dollars. Stadium parking lot, PPEL dollars, right? And so we need to have that flexibility to use both funds so that as we're coming upon these larger ticket items, we've got enough dollars there that are generated so that we can get after that. The one thing that I don't know that's on that list, the debt service fund, we're trying to live within PPEL and save, but once in a while, we know that where we're at enrollment wise, we need to add space. And so that's why you saw us go out for the bond vote for the 2 intermediate schools. So that note is out there to pay off those 2 buildings over time. So there is that component too of what we can use to support facilities projects, but by and large, PPEL and SAVE we like to lean on first before having to go out for a bond vote. Fair, John? Other questions? Laura?
If you don't use all, so let's assume it passes and assume over the next 10 years you get 60 million. 2 questions. One, what will happen to that money if it's hypothetically not spent, which, I mean, with as many buildings in Linn-Mar, I don't know how much HVAC repairs cost for this scale, but I imagine it's more than mine. What will happen with that money if it's not spent? And then on the other hand, if it does not pass, what won't be able to be repaired? What will the opportunity will be missing out on? What's gonna what's the real terms?
Yep.
What won't get built? What won't get repaired?
Right. So I would say that, we want to send a clear message that we are using taxpayer dollars wisely, right? And we wouldn't be going to ask for the dollars if we don't feel like they're needed. So we're not going to be a bank and continue to bank money over time. If there is some dollars left over time, and let's say, it's, I don't know how many years out, we're looking at another attendance center. Maybe it's an 8th elementary. Maybe it's a 2nd high school, right? Maybe the bond vote that we would have to go out for, we can put a little save dollars that are still sitting back in the pot for that. Maybe we could allocate some PPEL. But what we're not going to do is we're not going to go ask our taxpayers for dollars right now that we don't think we need to help support the district and the facilities. John?
Yep. So if there's money left over, let's say, so if we had $60 million and our revenue stream stops, we have that $60 million, we've spent $59 million of it, and we still have $1 million in the bank, we can still use that money past that 10-year period. It's not like it magically goes away at the end of the 10 years. We can still use it that following year. Does that answer your question? So it's not like we have a timetable where here's your revenue and it has to be spent by this point in time or it goes away. It still rolls from year to year in the bank, so we would still be able to, we would use up all of that rather quickly.
Could you touch on the other part, what won't, if it fails,
Yep.
then what?
Yeah, so what I would say is, the repair and the need is still there, so that needs to be funded somehow, right? So we have to pay to keep our buildings up to date, upkept, and in functioning order. So our revenue fund that we could use for that would be SAVE. So potentially some of the projects that the facility master plan came up with and the board approved, those may have to be put on hold. The way that we repair things, we may have to look at. We'd have to be a little more cost conscious. So if I think about, this thing's not worth repairing, it's better to replace because it's near the end of life. But that's 10 times more expensive than a Band-Aid approach. We may have to go to more of a break-fix Band-Aid approach just to limp by because we don't have the correct funding in place to correct things properly or in the best use of taxpayer dollars, where in the long run those Band-Aid approaches keep adding up and then I still have to go back and replace that, versus if I could have replaced it a little sooner, that would have been the most efficient way to spend the dollars. So those are the things we kind of have to look at. Or it's just deferring projects, right? Like, hey, this carpet's in really bad shape, but I don't have the funds to come in and replace it, so it just keeps getting kicked down the road until we would have the funding there to do it. So that's really kind of, I don't want to paint that bad picture, but those are the things that we would have to keep in mind if we have a funding stream that we're accustomed to have that we no longer have to keep the buildings in the shape that we're used to.
So the amount of saved dollars over the next 10 years versus the amount of potential PPEL dollars is
Save dollars. I want to say our save dollars are roughly $7 million a year.
And that's already allocated in the budget.
Correct.
So like that is money that is currently being used for things, but you hypothetically would have to like stretch that budget to.
Correct. To cover everything else that we're paying for out at PPEL. Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I already asked one first. I apologize, I was late, but I didn't know if there was like a hit list of things that, these are things that we want to do, an order of priority of these are the, items we want to purchase or, efforts we want to put forth in the district. So I didn't know if that was already presented, and if it was, I apologize.
No, that's okay. You want to just talk about that maintenance of effort?
Yeah.
Kind of already what you
Yep. So I can go back to. So really, here's what we've used it for in the past: is the improvement of our grounds or the upkeep of our grounds. So snow removal equipment, snow blowers, lawnmowers, things like that. Roof.
What you're looking to use the upcoming money for, anything that's delineated as far as priority 1,
2, and 3.
We don't have funding, this is still 1, that kind of thing.
Gotcha. Yeah. So really, I mean, our technology, we need to keep that up to date in this world. So computers have a life cycle on them and replacement. Our buses, we need to keep those in good working order to keep kids safe back and forth to school. Life cycle for roofs. Yep. So, but as we look at those things, if this funding goes away, like we probably decrease that and just go to a break fix mentality, because we don't have the funding there to replace an entire roof. So even though it's leaking, it's like we're gonna have to go patch that roof. We don't have the money to replace it.
Thank you. Sure. Do you have, or I guess we go back to the expenditures, have you factored in what the expenditures would be for the new buildings that we're looking at, like the administration building, the Performing Arts Center, what we plan on doing with the arena or whatever we're doing with that? Have you factored in what that looks like yet for the district, or as far as cost goes?
Yeah. So the admin building, we had a issuance of bonds last year, sales tax bonds, sales tax revenue bonds out of the SAVE fund. So that's funded through SAVE. The Performance Center is also funded through SAVE. The board approved the resolution for the issuance of sales tax bonds on that. So those are both SAVE funded projects currently. We haven't made any decisions yet on the indoor activity center that you referred to.
Right, I'm talking the cost it is to maintain that, what that's like, was that factored into?
Gotcha. Yep. So there's a life cycle cost on those. So really, a lot of the items in there are a 15 to 20 year lifespan. So that would be well past any of the revenue that is coming in for this current round of PPEL. We would be about 15 years down the road until we had anything that was hitting its life cycle. Now we have our general maintenance and upkeep, right? Our cleaning, our custodial in those arenas. So I would say that yes, that's factored in there, but any of the major high dollar repairs would be well beyond the tenure of this PPEL cycle.
So when you're saying the 1.34 billion, whatever it is, the revenue $3.5 $4 million a year, but we're also, even if that didn't get passed, you still have 0.33.
Correct.
Revenue.
Yep.
So
Yep.
you still are getting some revenue in, probably over the next 10 years, it'll be close to $10 million.
Close to. Correct.
Okay. So the difference is somewhere between 10 million and 60 million, $50 million. I guess my question is, do you have an expenditure or projection of what this money is assigned for? I think that goes back to her question, are we targeting this money for something? Or is it just maintenance and,
Yeah. Yep. So
parking lots and roofs, things like that?
correct, and that's really what that will look like. And I don't know how specific we can necessarily get there, but the way that I've looked at this in the past is, so we know we're going to spend $600,000 on roofs. We're going to have X amount that we're going to have to spend on plumbing. Is more of a holistically, not I'm going to spend $600,000 on the roof next year at Indian Creek, but $600,000 on a roof district-wide, so that we're able to evaluate year by year on where is the need the most. So I have something like that puts together that kind of gives you your different, what's the word I'm looking for, different kinds of projects, but not building specific.
Well, I gotta think you have the averages over the last 10 years.
Correct.
And what these are going to cost. Naturally, the costs are going to go up.
Yep.
But you have life expectancy on these projects, the things that have to be done on a regular maintenance basis.
Right.
Roofs and windows and doors and equipment.
Yep.
And that would be the question, you know, over the next 10 years, is it $50 million? Is it $30 million? Is it
Right.
$10 million?
Right. And then all the things that or the unexpected that come up at the most inopportune times too is making sure that we have some funds left over there to address those if needed as well.
Well, and again, I think you said this year you had 30-some million dollars in the door. So it's not to say if we don't get this money, we're in dire straits. I guess when we go back and talk about being fiscally responsible with the taxpayers' money, I think when I think of fiscal responsibility, I don't say give me as much as you can, and then we'll go from there. I'm looking for transparency and say, what are we gonna do? This is the need we have. This is why we're asking for this money, and we can go from there. But other than just saying, hey, give me as much as that we can ask for, and then we'll spend it accordingly, it doesn't seem to be transparent.
Yep.
Hello. Go ahead. Yeah, so I think of the transparency thing when one of your first bullet points is grounds improvements or something like that. On the other side, we're just looking at, you know, I interact at the high school, Indian Creek, Novak, Boulder Point. Those are the facilities that I know. And I'd equate the outside of those to, you know, you just hand a 18-year-old new house and don't tell them to maintain it at all. Don't teach them to maintain it. So over the last 10 years, it looks like, I don't know where these funds are going to in that bullet point. So if we can get, you know, some transparency on expenditures of how you use these the last 10 years, and we don't see a connection between where you guys are saying you're spending it versus is it actually getting done. That goes to his point of, well, fiscal since, you know, being fiscally conservative, do we really need the entire amount, or could we, you know, hedge our bets with the taxpayers and say, why don't we just ask for a medium amount and maybe get more acceptance? So, long ramblings too. I think we'd like to see how it was done in the last 10 years to see where we're getting the most bang for the buck on these tax dollars.
Thank you for that, and I think that's something we could easily add to the slide deck. Barry.
I'd like to make two comments. The first one is the saved dollars are sales tax dollars. That's the biggest thing for that. The only thing we can spend saved dollars on are three items. We can spend it on new buildings, we can spend it on technology, and we lower the tax levy. And over the last X amount of years, we've used that to keep our tax levy down. That's different than this 1.3, 1.34. The second item is I'm just going to throw somebody under the bus, and I'm going to say, I don't want to see our school system in the same predicament that Cedar Rapids is in today. They didn't do any upkeep for 20 years, and now they've got closed buildings and they have buildings going downhill. So, you know, you listed a handful of buildings that are wonderful, good buildings, but we've got some older buildings that are taking a little bit more work, a little bit more energy, a little bit more time to keep them up, albeit roofs, windows, etc. So that, you know, the transparency item is huge. I mean, that's exactly right, and that's exactly what we're all trying to do. We're trying to be as transparent as we possibly can. And we don't have extra money sitting around. I'm on board, so I understand that. But when we look at the budget, we look at the numbers, we look at everything, we don't have money sitting around. It's not like we have buku dollars sitting in the corner and all that kind of stuff. And then the next item is when you increase, you know, if tax dollars come to our district through different sources. And just because they're building 150 new homes in the district doesn't mean we're going to have an influx of money tomorrow. Because we get money coming back to our district from students. You know, if our tax dollar from our property does not go it goes to the state of Iowa, and they allocate it out per student. So there's a lot of moving pieces in it.
Barry, that's on the sales tax side. The property tax side, you're right, it does go to the state, but it is based on our valuation and our levy rate. Yep.
Sorry if I rambled too much.
No, I just want to add one more thing to that as well, for Lori, also on the board. The $30 million left over at the end of the year, I mean, John said it, but I just want to restate what he said. It's not that we didn't spend it, or it's extra money. It's that we have it earmarked for expenditures for a project that just the bills haven't come in yet because it's an ongoing project. So it's not $30 million left over that we can spend on something else. It's $30 million that we have earmarked for a bill that has not yet arrived because we're in the middle of a project. So saved dollars are earmarked based on how long we know we have saved dollars. We have them allocated for specific projects over time. So just because they're not expended in the current fiscal year doesn't mean it's extra dollars we can spend on something else or use in place of something else. They're earmarked for something that we have to pay for in the next fiscal year or in 2 fiscal years, depending on how long that project takes to complete.
Yep. And we also have to remember that that's across all funds. So at any given year, the board has a goal to have a solvency ratio above 7%. So really what that means is about a $7 million balance in our general fund, give or take. Traditionally, we've been in the 12-13% range. ISB and the state's guidance is to be anywhere between 7 and 17%. So those funds aren't a representation of just what we have left in our PPEL or our save accounts, but all funds, general fund, student activity fund, food and nutrition fund. So there's balances in all of there that makes that up on top of the selling of the bonds that we haven't gotten all the expenditures for.
Yeah, Justin Foss, I'm also on the board. So again, just to finish what Brett was saying, with the $30 million, we've accrued those costs. We already have accrued those costs. We just haven't paid them yet because the bill hasn't come in yet. So to think that they're just sitting there, that we've got extra money that we didn't spend, is not looking at it in a way that an auditor would look at it, or the way that we have to maintain funds. The save money that we've got coming in is great. You know, there's nothing to say that the governor couldn't get rid of SAFE or the taxes. So by having PPEL, we're able to control our destiny and have the money that we need. It's hard to think of just general maintenance of, you know, what are you paying for? Well, when my kid's laptop broke, he went in the next day and got a new laptop or a loaner laptop. We don't have the money to be able to make those immediate repairs or to have that extra stock on hand. And the kid doesn't get a laptop for however long it happens to be.
I think for the name of transparency, it's not necessarily what we've used it for in the past is like an overarching name for it. But if you were able to break it down year by year and say specifically like this is what we've used it for, to kind of echo what he was saying, where there's certain buildings that it appears as though they're taken care of more than others. I think looking at that and having that breakdown of what the expenditures are versus what you know, the save dollars would be allocated for, or the PPEL fund, would be allocated for, to have that image or to see it, I think that is what the transparency factor is what we're talking about.
Yep.
For the public to see, because if they're going to be voting on it, personally, I think that is what they're asking for. If they can see it and they can recognize the need. I mean, all of us want to make sure that our buildings are taken care of, and our students are in upkept buildings. You know, we don't want them to be in a situation like Cedar Rapids by any means. But if we were able to see that, I think more people would be less skeptical and more on board.
I think that's a fair comment and a fair ask, and that's something that we can put together. Yep.
So, and Barry, you might be able to answer this. $33 million we're waiting on. You said there's reserves. There's a reserve portion. Where are we sitting with reserves right now?
I don't have that information in front of me. I'd have to look that up. I don't want to misspeak on that.
Are we above 7%?
So at the end of fiscal year, we were at 6.96%. So we fell just below 7% at the end of the last fiscal year.
Just to get to the minimum level.
Correct.
But the other thing was, we're waiting on this money is being allocated for some other debt. In the meantime, is that money sitting in an interest-bearing account?
Yes. Yes. Yep, we have some CDs, and we actually just issued another CD here. So yes, they are an interest-bearing account. So we're making money while we're not spending the money. Absolutely.
Even though it's earmarked.
Correct. Yep.
So you've got money coming, you're generating money off that money, even though you've got it earmarked for other things.
Correct.
Is that money figured into these balances?
Any interest income that comes in as interest income or revenue. It would be, so everything that's in there is yes, because it was at the end of the fiscal year last year, so that would show all revenue. So some of that for this year, no, because that was at the end of last year. So that's what our
Anything that money's drawn in would show next year.
correct. Yep, that'd be our miscellaneous income that was a piece of the pie up there.
Are you buying that groundskeeper guy like the coolest John Deere tractor, or is it just like, is it used, middle of the grade? Like, I know we're hardcore football fans around here, and a lot of those Linn-Mar kids end up at Iowa and some other schools. So we want to make sure the football field is taken care of, but not too, like, he's not doing like donuts in the.
No, correct. I would say we buy cost-effective, practical equipment. To answer that there, it's not bottom of the line, but it is not top of the line.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
So the 1.34 is the max, right? And set by
The state.
the state. Is that 1.34, was that what was passed 10 years ago?
Correct. That is our current levy now. So what we're asking for, or what's on the ballot, would be an extension of that at the same $1.34.
So in 10 years from now, if this does pass in 10 years from now, I mean, you got 2 more buildings, maybe even more than that you're going to be taking care of. You mentioned the 15 years you kind of allocated because you're not going to have much expenditures on those buildings. They're new. But now you're going to have more buildings in that 1.34 set by the state. If that's the max again, then obviously you're going to be asking for that again in 10 years or the max again, correct?
Yeah, hard to predict that future, but yep.
We're spending all the money that's already in there, from what I'm hearing. Some transparency there would be great because you're asking for the max now, and you're gonna need more in 10 years to cover the new buildings that you're building.
And maybe your point's to try to back it down now in the future, knowing that we can increase.
Yeah, and I think what Geraldine was talking about there, the transparency of what have we spent it on in the past and what do we plan on spending on going forward. I think that's a good thing because I think that'll show you that we already used the entire $1.34 now, and we will still need it in the future. And you're right, that need might increase, but also our valuations have increased on an average of 3.5% per year. So that $1.34 stays the same, but because our property value rises, the revenue also rises. And I understand that the cost of goods also rise too, right? So that equation isn't perfect, but it does generate more dollars even though the levy rate is the same. Correct.
But again, it's based upon valuation, so the valuation of the properties go up too as inflation goes up.
Yep.
When you're increasing your revenue.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
When you say $1.34, what is that impact per household?
Oh, I can get back to you on that. So it's $1.34 of your assessed valuation after the rollback, and I don't know if they've set the rollback amount for this year yet or not. So that's, I want to say it was like 54% last year, 50-something%. So for example, $100,000 house, the rollback's 54%, and you're really paying on $54,000 of that per thousand. So that would be 54 times your $1.34, $74 roughly. Yep. But I know, so as valuations go up, the state does change that rollback number from year to year. It's like they kind of understand the target that they're trying to get for funds. They know the overall state's valuation, and then they play with that rollback number. So if your property value goes up 20%, you're not necessarily paying 20% more in taxes because that rollback number is in there. And then, and I should say prior to that, you also get your homestead credit off of that. That balance in thousands is what you're paying taxes on.
John, isn't the true value though, I know you talk about the 134, but it's actually
Yes, but so the reason I keep them separate is because the $1.34 is what is up to the voters. The 33 cents is up to the board. The total PEPEL levy would be $1.67 with those two combined. That's what that would be what's collected in property taxes. Yes, is the $1.67. The voters have control of $1.34 of that.
On a quick math, $300,000 home, approximately $225.
Is that comparable back?
56. I use the number 56%. That was the last number I saw. So
Okay.
that'd be 168.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Just curious if there are any plans in the future for any money to be set aside for any increased security in all the buildings?
That's a really good question and top of mind for everybody, right? We are currently working on a safety grant that school districts across the state of Iowa were given. State came in, did a risk assessment on that, so we're working towards that. I think the thing that we're learning as we work through that grant is each of our buildings through that grant are offered up to $50,000. Through that state assessment, we know that once we get approval from the grant, that it's not going to have our buildings necessarily standardized with the same exact safety features, right? Because we've got a couple of buildings that are more brand new that don't need the infusion of some safety feature that our older buildings are going to get. So as we're talking about that, we know that also PEPEL is a funding stream that could help support us more long-term, not in the second year after the grant is expended, right? But to get our buildings all more standardized in those safety features. So it's definitely top of mind and something we've been talking about in the last couple of weeks. So thank you for that question.
Just real quick.
Yep, that's okay.
So just to confirm, I think you kind of touched on it, so the last 10-year levy is essentially there's nothing left from that?
No, there still is. So that expires in June of 2025. So we're still collecting property tax on that up till June of 2025.
Okay, but essentially there's just that 1 year left. There's not anything extra as far as.
Correct. Correct.
Okay, and then real just quickly, we talk a lot about roofing and roofing contractors, so I was like curious on the actual budget, $600K a year. Is obviously even year, you got, obviously a couple brand new buildings, you got a couple, obviously aquatic center and stuff like that. Is there like a system in place or like do you guys have your own, I guess, plan as far as specifically on Indian Creek needs this much, 150 for, obviously it's older, or obviously, how do you guys do that exactly?
Yeah, so we work with a consultant that manages our roofing database and helps us put that plan together.
Is it just a local contractor or?
It's a local architectural firm, Shive Hattery.
Just numbers wise, if we're spending $600K on roofs every year, times across the buildings, I mean, we can, you're talking about the Band-Aid reference, and it's like, we can easily do some Band-Aids that are cost effective and then just save some of that. 200 Band-Aids, 400 on new, allocated for 5 years, 6 years, I mean, we can have all brand new roofs in 10 years.
Correct, and we have done some of that, to be fair. We generally do roof replacements. On this building, for example, we did do a coating on the gym dome back here because of the cost effectiveness of that and just the way we decided to go there due to the cost involved there. So we do some of each now, but we always try to keep the long-term and goal and what's going to be the best use of taxpayer dollars. Is it a Band-Aid right now, or are we better served to spend a little more money and get a replacement in? Yes. Yes, correct.
Okay, well, we thank you for your time this evening. Like I said, we're going to wrap. If you have additional questions, make sure to email John or myself, or we're happy to try to answer more questions. So thank you for your time tonight and coming out on a cold winter evening. Take care, everyone.